In this video, we're going to take a jump forward. So in the previous lessons, we were working on our blog, and that's fine, but I want you to think about that database interactivity that we had. Most of it we just wrote on the spot, but if you think about it, that's something that you're likely going to be using in every single project. So in these cases, many times, especially when you're not using a framework, which you're not ready for, it's smart to take advantage of tools that other people have built, other people in the community. Because if you think about it, the best minds in the community are capable of building something that's much more secure and flexible than you are. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at a tool called Composer. And Composer is a dependency manager for PHP. This is one of the best of any language that's available. If you're familiar with Ruby, then they have Ruby gems. If you're familiar with Node, then they have NPM. And for PHP, we have Composer, which is rapidly catching on. So Composer gives us an easy way to specify what a project's dependencies are. This project depends on this tool, and this tool, and this testing framework. And then when somebody else on our team or somebody across the globe wants to use it, they can view our list of dependencies and immediately install them for the project. So that's still probably a little bit blurry to you, and it should be. This is confusing stuff at first. The easiest way for me to describe it is for us to just dig in, and that's what we'll do. So I'm going to click on Get Started. Definitely have a read over this, but I'll try to explain most of it. If I click on the installation link, here we go. Now we have two options. You can install it locally or you can install it globally. Now your first instinct is to install it globally, and that's probably fine. There are some issues where maybe if you have specific projects that are relying on the same version, well then it's possible that maybe an update occurs and that will break what you have set for the old project. But in this case, I think it's okay. Let's install it globally. So I will scroll down to the global section, and we just need to copy these two lines. So I will begin by copying this first line and moving over to the terminal. Now we're going to go into our sites directory. So we have that in applications, mamp, htdocs. Next, if I list the files, you'll see that we have this new directory that I created called Composer. So I will go ahead and cd into that, and you'll see it's just an empty directory for now. So let's begin by pasting that link in. And what that's going to do is check your php.ini file, make sure everything is set up correctly, and it's going to download a .far file. So we'll run that. And you'll see right here, some settings on your machine may cause stability issues. If you get the same thing, be sure to follow whatever is listed here and get that fixed. In this case, though, I know that I'll be okay, and it has been installed. So if I list the files, now we have that new composer.far file, which is just a PHP archived file. Now, as I noted, you can either install it locally or globally. If you do want to install it globally, let's move this into our bin. So I can say move composer.far to, and we'll store this on the Mac in /user/bin, and I'm going to call it Composer. Now, if you get this error, permission denied, then you need to run it sudo. Sudo, which means super user, move composer.far, once again to user bin, composer, and we'll click yes to fix my typo. I'm going to enter my password, and now if I list the files, it has been moved, but now I can run Composer. And now check it out, that has been installed. Great. So now we're ready to get started. I'm going to switch over to Sublime Text and create a new file called composer.json. This is a JSON file, it's not PHP, it's just a bit of JSON. So we're going to begin, and this is where we specify the dependencies for this project. And that way, when other people use this project, they can immediately install any dependencies that are required. That's the basic idea. So I'm going to begin by requiring, and this is where we specify any of our dependencies. Well, we don't know what we require yet. Let's go ahead and grab something. And we're going to go to packagist.org. And this is the main repo for all of the Composer packages that are available. So remember at the beginning of the video, I was talking about finding a community-driven tool for working with your databases. And what we want is an ActiveRecord implementation. So I will look for something like ActiveRecord. And there we go. Here's the one that we want. What we see here is it's an open source ORM library based on the ActiveRecord pattern. It's very likely you don't have a clue what any of those mean, and that's okay. Once I show you how it works, I think you're going to love it, though. It's very cool. So what we need here is the name, so I will simply copy that, and we also need to specify the version. In this case, often you'll see like version 1.2, 1.3, and that way you can say this project relies on 1.2. And that way, if maybe they update the project to 1.8, and that would potentially break your code, you can specify, hey, I only want to use 1.2. And that way, when other people use your project, they will install that specific version rather than simply the most recent one. So let's go back to Sublime Text and paste that in. I'll get rid of my sidebar, and now I'm going to specify what version I want. Now, if we simply want to say require any version, I can specify a star. If we have a specific version, we can do that. Or I can do dev master, which just means pull on the developer branch. And now we're going to run the composer install command. When we run install, what that's going to do is grab the composer.json file that you added to the root of your application and download any of the dependencies that you specified. So let's try it. I list the files. All we have is that composer.json file. But now I run composer install, and that will likely take just a few seconds, so I will fast forward a bit. And there we go. Now that worked. So I will list the files, and now you'll see we have this new vendor. So I can cd into this vendor folder, and if I view the tree for that directory, you'll see that it actually downloaded quite a bit. It downloaded everything that we need to use PHP's ActiveRecord implementation. So let's clear the screen, go back to Sublime Text, and I'm going to bring back the sidebar, and now let's figure out how we can actually use this in our projects. So the first thing, of course, is to include the library. So I'm going to create a new file, and we're just going to store this in index.php for the time being. I'll begin by requiring the ActiveRecord.php file, and we can see it's within PHP ActiveRecord. Looks like the directory is duplicated, but that's okay. And what file we want is ActiveRecord.php. So let's go ahead and grab that. Vendor, PHP ActiveRecord, one more time, ActiveRecord.php. Next, we need to set up our configuration, much like we did when we were setting up our own database connections. So I'll hide the sidebar, and now we have access to this new class, ActiveRecord. And don't be confused by classes. In the next lesson, I will explain them to you. So I will run ActiveRecord, and we're going to set up our config. Notice we're taking advantage of that namespacing idea that we learned several lessons ago. We're going to initialize, and I'm going to pass in an anonymous function in here, or some would call it a closure. So this will accept the config object, and now we can set that up. So CFG, and of course you can name that anything you want. I'm just doing that for brevity. So here we will set the models directory. And models are going to confuse you at first, and don't worry, it's going to take some time for you to wrap your mind around the concept of a model, but just go along with me for now. So I'm going to set it to models, and I'll go ahead and create that directory right now while I'm thinking about it. New folder, models. So think of a model as the representation of your data. It's really the workhorse of your projects. Next, we set the connections. So CFG, set connections, and we'll pass an array within here. And here we can set different connections, whether we are working on our development branch or maybe you want to have different connections for your production. And you'll find that, yes, you do want to have different settings. Your production credentials are going to be different than your development credentials. Here, we're going to use the default for development because we are developing. Once again, I'm going to hide the sidebar. And now we will set up, we're connecting to MySQL. And we want the username followed by the password, which was Tuts Plus. And we are connecting to localhost. Finally, what is the database name that we want to connect to? Let's go to the terminal and show databases to refresh our memory. And we're going to use the blog database. Use blog, show tables. There we go. All right, so we will use the blog database. So now our configuration options are done. You'd probably want to put that in a different file, but it's okay to group them together for now. Now we're going to set up our first model. And for now, if it's easier, you can think of the model as the representation of a table. So here we're going to create a model for posts. So let's do that right now. Bring back the sidebar, and I'm going to add a new file to models called post.php. Now within here, all we have to do is set up our class post, and it's going to extend ActiveRecord/model. Once again, you haven't learned about classes just yet, so go along for the ride, then watch the follow-up screencast on working with classes, and then maybe if you come back to this lesson, you'll be able to understand it a little bit better. But for now, again, I just want you to follow along and type everything that I am. So this is all we have to do. We've created our model. Now we have access to post, which extends ActiveRecord/model, and we gain access to everything that was defined there. And believe it or not, with that little bit of code, now we have this beautiful way to connect with our tables. I'll give you an example. Let's say post equals, and now we can access this table using the post class. So watch, I'm going to say post find, and I'm going to specify an ID. Let's see which one we want. Select star from posts, and we're going to find the ID of 1. So we'll come back and say find 1, and now I'm going to print our post and view this in the browser. Here I am in the browser, and I'm going to view the source to make it easier to read. Now we can see we had this new post object, and check it out. There's all of the attributes from our query, and look how nice that was to write. And more importantly, though, how natural and readable that is. We're going to say create a variable called post, and now we're going to get that representation of the post table, and we're going to find the row that has an ID of 1. But that's not all we can do. We can even do dynamic searches. So take a look at this. We will come back, and let's say we want to find the row where the title is third post. Okay, well, we can do that very easily. I'll say post find by title third post. Now I'll come back to Chrome, and now take a look. We fetched that specific row according to what the title is. And now what I want you to note is that this method was dynamic. Find by title. Any row that we have, for example, I could say find by body, and let's maybe copy this one right here, made on the web. So let's say we want to grab the post and find by body, and now I'm going to paste that in here. So find the post where the body field is equal to made on the web. Let's try that out, reload, and now we found it. But what if we just want to grab all the posts, sort of like select star from posts? Well, let's get rid of that entirely. And now we'll say post all. And now let's make it a little more natural. It should be posts at this point. I reload the page, and now we have an array of post objects. Here's the first, here's the second, here's the third, here's the fourth. And then at that point I could say, and we'll just put this all on one page, let's add a snippet of HTML and open up PHP, and we'll say for each post as P, and for each. And now we will have an article here, and within it we will echo out P title. Reload the page, there's our titles. And within our div for the body, let's bring out P body. Reload, and there we go. So now I want you to take note of how much easier this was to do. Not only have you saved yourself from having to create your own DB class, but now you have the assurance that you have a much more elegant way to work with your tables, and the assurance that this has been highly tested and improved by the PHP community. So you're really getting a lot of bang for your buck, and this is entirely for free. So if you are working along with the blog lessons, you could easily go and pull out that DB class we built and put in something like this. So this will not be a full tutorial on working with PHP ActiveRecord. You can refer to their documentation, but let me just give you a couple ideas. We've learned that we can do these dynamic searches to find a row. We know we can fetch all the rows. You can also do some great things when you're joining columns, which we discussed earlier. But what about creating? That's something you'd probably like to do as well. Well, why don't we do this? Post, create, and now we're going to supply it an array containing the information necessary to create a new row. So in this case, we need the title and the body. So here we'll say title, and we'll say isn't ActiveRecord great? ActiveRecord was actually popularized by the Ruby on Rails framework, but it's since been ported to many languages at this point. And now we need the body, and we'll just say, yes, it is. Okay, and that's all it takes. Get our post model, and now we're going to create a new row, and here's the fields that we require. So let's come back, reload the page, and we are going to get this warning, but it's just saying that I've set my date improperly. That likely will not be happening on your system. What's more important, though, is if we come back to the terminal, now you'll see, yep, we've added that new row, and it took 1 or 2 lines of very elegant and readable code. But what if we want to update one? Okay, well, let's try this. Post find, and let's find the most recent one, and the ID was 5. So we're going to say post equals post find by ID, which is 5, and now we're going to update it. So post title equals updated the row. Very cool. We've updated everything we needed to. Now I'm going to run post save, And with that alone, we've fetched a row from the database, we've updated one of the fields, and now we've saved it. I'll reload that. We're going to get the same thing, but that's okay. You don't need to worry about it. We're not working with dates in this case. But if I come back and I reload, now you'll see that we have updated that title. So definitely, if you are not using a PHP framework, save yourself some time. Don't reinvent the wheel, but definitely learn how the wheel works. And once you do have a basic understanding of it, take advantage of the amazing PHP community and use some of these packages that can save you great amounts of time and in the process make your code far more readable. Now, I'm expecting that there will be lots of questions related to this lesson, so definitely just leave a comment below this video. My name's Jeffrey Wade. See you in the next video.